Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Because I Can podcast. And this week we've got somebody even more inspirational than usual, and I have to declare at this hand, no relation. So we're going to say welcome to Jo Bradshaw, and the first question we always get, Tim, is Jo somehow related to you, or vice versa? And the answer is no. Although we do actually have quite a lot of things in common, like we were both on the side of Mount Everest in 2015 when all the kind of wheels came off. And I think people even still thought we were related at that point, Jo, didn't they? But no, it is complete coincidence. How best to describe Jo? Jo is an adventurer, although I think, Jo, fair to say an unlikely adventurer, but we'll get Jo to sort of tell her story in a minute. Took up adventuring probably somewhat later in life. I'm being polite, obviously, but she can explain that to you all in a minute. And interestingly, Jo's the latest member of the Sandstone team, actually, and led Mandy Hickson, one of our other associates, up Kilimanjaro. So I guess we're all practicing what we preach when we sort of lay that out. So Jo, very welcome. Nice to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks ever so much, and great to be here. And yeah, great family name, but different families, I think. of saying it.
Jo, just tell everyone listening, just give us a quick overview of your kind of story, because I find it quite inspirational. Your sort of massive change of direction, didn't you, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you do talks in schools and they see this person as they are and as you are now, and you forget that when I left school, I wanted to work with horses all my life. I was going to marry a farmer or farrier, and there's live the great outdoor life, and I'm living the great outdoor life, but in a totally different way now. And I did go and I worked with horses, and I ran stable yards and trained competition horses, and then it all came to a bit of a crashing end in my mid-20s, and I needed to go and find a job. So I worked in a retail store, and knew that I needed to still make something of my life. So because I think society tells us then, we need to get a good job in order to get married, in order to have kids, in order to have a house, blah, blah, blah. So I worked my way up through management in retail and then various other industries. And in my early 30s, felt that I wasn't really fulfilling my life's potential, I think. I was very risk averse and said no to a lot of, I said yes to a lot of things and then said no. So that's really annoying for people because they don't know where they stand. And I did a parachute jump for charity, which then led on to a bike ride in Peru, which gradually changed my life. And in my late 30s, I gave up sort of a good business career and moved from Buckinghamshire down to Wiltshire to work for an adventure company, and started leading expeditions and retrained. And this is like all such a snapshot of 50 years of my life in like 2 seconds. And then I went self-employed freelance in 2010, and now lead expeditions overseas, and I teach Duke of Edinburgh Award students the expedition element, and do public speaking, and have climbed Everest via an earthquake, like you do.
You haven't just climbed Everest, Jo, have you? I mean, Everest is one of the 7 the highest mountains on each continent, and you've done how many of them now?
I have done 6, and some of them multiple times as well. So I'm,
that's just bad navigation.
Yeah. I got lost a lot, but it's really interesting when I was doing a little personal challenge last week, and a guy came to join me on one of my. It was a sort of 24-hour cycle challenge, and he came to join me, and we were talking about different mountains, and he said, "So how many times have you climbed Mirror Peak?" And I said, "Oh, I've climbed it, I think 3 or 4 times." And he was like, "Oh, is that all?" He was laughing. I said, "But it's my job, this is my job." So, and I'm really fortunate that my life has turned out like this. And it's not by luck, it's by a lot of hard work and determination and changing my attitude to myself as well. So I think that's really important.
Which is because I can, isn't it? I mean, that's literally, what the whole thing is about.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it seems to be quite a theme, doesn't it, Tim, of the number of people that we've spoken to who are really, in my mind, inspirational. You step back and you go, wow, what have you succeeded in? Wow, how have you managed to achieve all that? And then you realise that their path to success went all over the place and lots of dead ends, and it all fell apart. And that then actually was the motivation to then move on to the next thing and the next thing. And we always see these amazing people that we look up to and just assume that their life has been a trajectory of success from beginning to end. And when you delve into it, you can see that actually a lot of the dead ends and the mistakes and the problems have actually made them stronger and developed skills which they've then used in different ways. And certainly with talking to a lot of the school kids over lockdown, and a lot of people finding that lockdown has really messed up their plans. Actually, it hasn't really messed up your ultimate goal. It might have made a short-term friction, a short-term problem, but perhaps looking at people like you, Jo, and getting to where you wanted to be by a circuitous route is more inspirational than the people who've just achieved it from success after success after success.
Yeah, absolutely. If I think if there had been a list written when I was at school of anybody who would go on to do what I've done, I wouldn't even have been on that list. I would have been so far off it, because I was very much the quiet one at school. I was kind of like Miss Average, really, in every way. I didn't excel at anything, but I just plodded on. And
welcome to the club, Jo. As I keep saying.
Well, I heard you speak. Yeah, exactly.
I've never been any good at anything.
And as a previous interviewee has said, I think you're being a bit modest, and I'm probably being a bit modest as well, because I was head of house in both my schools, and my teachers clearly saw some sort of leadership qualities in there, even though I didn't. And I think because I went to school with such strong characters, who were all very surprised when I got the head of house and they didn't. And, school wasn't a very happy place for me, for various different reasons, but I sort of knuckled down and got on with it, because, what else can you do? You can't get out of it. So, and I left school after the first year of sixth form, which was planned, because I was then going to go on to agricultural college, and I had to do a year's experience before. So I came down to New Forest, which is near where I live now, and worked at a really amazing stable yard run by an Olympic dressage rider, and loved it so much that I binned agricultural college because I didn't want to go back into that environment, and went out and learned through life rather than learning through qualifications. And that's basically what I've done.
Yeah, one of the things I find really interesting, and funny enough, Paul and I crash into this all the time, particularly with the big sort of law firms, accounting firms that we deal with, is nobody ever wants to be a leader, right? It's really interesting. So when everybody's at school, we're utterly focused on what Paul would call your kind of expert power base, be the lawyer, be the accountant, be whatever, the surveyor, whatever you want that is. And it's almost as though people go all the way through school, all the way through university to do that. And it never occurs to anybody that at some point, if you want to be CEO, actually your single most important job is to lead the company. And the professional qualification, i.e. the accountancy, the law firm, whatever it might be, to have got you there, suddenly is almost not relevant anymore. And I find it really interesting that we don't identify in kids and in businesses leadership potential enough. Whether that's just because you can't quantify it necessarily, or whether it's because you kind of can't, sit an exam and go, oh, you're a leader. I don't know, but I know loads of people like you. We're privileged, aren't we, with all the people we kind of hang out with, that actually they've all led, they've all done stuff, but they've got their own way. Kind of nobody's gone. I guess with me and Paul and Mandy to some extent with the military, you kind of get pigeonholed, but most people kind of, nobody goes, oh, Jo, excellent leadership potential. You should consider moving down a kind of leadership track. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think we are drummed into, I mean, I don't know what, that so much these days, but definitely when I was at school, of being the lawyer, the doctor, the sort of all these big professions. And I remember when we got to the careers section at school, and I was the last one to be talked to. Somebody has to be last. but I'd already sorted out what I was going to do, because I knew my school didn't have that skill set of helping me do it. So myself and my parents, we went and did it. But I also think that, you know, we're told to strive for the bigger, the better, the, you know, the newest, the everything, rather than being happy with what you do and wanting to become better at it, not for the money or for the title, but because it makes you feel good. And when I've spoken to students in the past, you know, I've been a manager of, you know, groups of people, and I manage people out on mountains, but I don't want to be, you know, the CEO or everything, because it means that it actually takes me away from what I set out to do in the first place, which was to be a good, you know, very good expedition leader. If I'm now running a company, maybe I can't do that. So it's interesting to see where people's level of what does success mean to you. You know, success to me means that I'm happy in what I do, I've got enough money to pay my bills, you know, I'm my family are happy and healthy.
That's what I read Kath's book. So Kath Bishop's obviously been on with same time as Mandy, actually, and you know, her book The Long Win, you know, that is exactly what all that's about, which is actually what does success look like for you, and what does it mean to you. And I think we sort of don't do enough of that, because there's a stereotype, isn't there? There's this expectation that actually if you've got 10 you need 11, if you've got 11 you need 12, you know, and it kind of doesn't matter what that is. And if I'm honest, most of that's probably driven by marketing agencies. You know, if you've got the 2 litre, you need the 3 litre, don't you? It's as simple as that. Which is actually true, obviously, but
I'm quite happy with my transit van, actually. And that's the thing, you know, I see people on expedition with all the funky new kit, and they have no clue how to use it, and they probably haven't trained enough, because they've
never been out with Paul and I. What are you talking about?
You know, they spend more time researching all this stuff on Google and buying all the new stuff, where actually go on eBay and buy it secondhand, because that's way more sustainable. Do your research about, you know, the good companies to buy things through that are sustainable for the planet, rather than all this funky stuff that you're going to use once and then it will sit in a cupboard and do nothing, you know. So I'm now in a very fortunate position where, you know, I'm an Osprey PAX ambassador, and I deal with I do a lot of kit testing for Paramo directional clothing. So I have my kit sorted, which is fantastic. But it didn't used to be like that. And when I couldn't afford new kit, I went onto eBay and I bought pre-loved stuff, which was.
Sure, I've actually lent I've got some of my gear left from Everest, and I actually in that times mine's been out, because we've had a few friends, Paul, haven't we, that have been to kind of base camp and stuff like that. You know, never to be underestimated. I do like to point out to people that base camp is 5 times higher than anything in the UK, and 1,000 meters higher than anything in the Alps. You know, people sort of forget that, I think.
Yeah.
And people go on base camp treks, and of course the various companies produce this list of kit, and I look, there's like 4 grams worth of kit on there. And if it all goes to plan, you're not going to use any of it. You know, ideally, you're not going to need that jacket or that sleeping bag or whatever. So the amount of times I've lent my kit out, I've just said to people, look, just take this. And, you know, if you damage it, lose it, break it, we'll worry about it later. But, you know, it's really high quality gear. Put it in your bag, bring it back. We'll talk about it when you come back again.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also this relates back to business. If what is actually your ethos in business? Is it to have the newest, the funkiest, the, you know, taking things away from the planet, or is it to be sustainable, and that includes having your staff underneath that mantle as well, because I think it can really resonate in the rest of what you do as a business. You know, are you constantly striving for new everything, or can you put your, you know, your sort of thought processes and your energy into making what you already have even better?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want Mandy Hickson's going to hate me now, really. But I talk about Kilimanjaro for a minute because I think Mandy is one of the most together people I've ever met, and Mandy and I have delivered quite a lot of training together, and we've worked together. And she has, she's got that kind of cool fighter pilot exterior, except when she's on the side of Kilimanjaro, not very well. And she sent me a video of herself, which I thought was, it's quite self-deprecating, but looking anything other than slightly together, which is not the kind of cool, calm exterior of a fighter pilot. Talk us through that, Jo, for a minute. I know Mandy won't mind. So,
yeah, she became a little bit sick. Kilimanjaro is not the cleanest place on the planet, and it's not because it's covered in poop or what have you, but there are bugs about, and also because we're not used to those types of bugs in that environment. One little sort of, maybe it's not even a slip up, but it's just maybe not washing your hands or I always say to clients, put your shoelaces inside your boots if you want to sort of just pop them on quickly before you walk out the tent. Don't let them trail across the campsite, because people go, oh, is that because we won't break an ankle? I said, no, because you're just picking up all these bugs on your laces, and then you do your laces up with your gloves or your hands, and then you pick up an energy bar, and and it's, I'm not saying that Mandy did that because she'll kill me, but you can, even if you're the most fastidious person in the world, and we've seen this with coronavirus, it can still get you. I've been sick on mountains before, and I am really fastidious about my hygiene and about people's hygiene around me, but there's only so much you can do. And bless her, Mandy succumbed.
But I think it was interesting to me was when we were talking earlier, you were saying that didn't you get tonsillitis or something on one of the trips? As team leader, I think that's an interesting dynamic, right?
Yeah, and it's absolutely demoralizing when you feel on an expedition you ought to be the strongest and the one that doesn't get sick, and all things to all people. And I've learned over my years of guiding people in the mountains that I am a human being. I do get sick, and I have been sick on mountains, fortunately not that often, but I'm as human as everyone else. I probably have more resilience to deal with it these days, but there's also a limit to what my body is capable of. And when I feel that it's not safe for me to carry on, and I'm actually going to hinder the group, then I will take myself out of the equation. But my aim always on expeditions is to get my groups in a position where they trust my local crew, because we work as one team. I'm not sort of the great leader and then there's the rest of them. I can't do my job without them, and vice versa. We work, as one of my DB students said this weekend, is the magic happens when we work as a team. Boom. Absolutely 100. This is a 14-year-old, I was like, that's just gold. I love that. And it's so true. You can't, I'm not an individual on this expedition. So I want them to get to be comfortable in the environment, but also teach them enough that they can do it without me, because I can't be everywhere. And if I needed to come off because someone's injured and then I'm not there, it would mean, they're floundering around. That's not leadership to me. That's an autocratic society where, I'm trying to be everything to everyone.
I think that's really interesting to steal those ideas and put them into the business environment. We meet so many people lawyers, doctors, vets, accountants, etc., who then get promoted and are leading the team that they perhaps used to be in. And they all feel initially that it's sort of lead by example. I need to work harder. I need to still do my old job and do leadership as well. I need to be the best lawyer in the room or the best doctor in the room to lead the team. And it's that sort of charging forwards, leading from the front. Everybody follow me. I've got this, which I suppose maybe worked a few hundred years ago. But it's really interesting to see that actually your job as a leader is not to be the one doing all the work. It's to set the team up so that the team can be the best, not you still being the absolute best. And so, exactly as you say, when you step back, when you go to the back of the group, when you even leave the group for a period of time, if the team can keep going, then you've done your job well as a leader. But I don't think many junior leaders or young people who are first into that leadership role, maybe there's a bit of imposter syndrome there. Maybe they sort of feel that they have to be the expert. They have to still be the best in the room. They're almost competing to be at the front, to be the fastest, to be the strongest, to be the first one to the summit. And that's and it's perhaps the other way around. We need to look at it. But yeah, really, really fascinating, stealing those ideas from mountaineering to business there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I think some people as well confuse being a good role model with pace setting as a leadership style. And I think that, for me, pace setting, we talk about how dangerous that is and how it's not particularly effective, particularly in business. There's a time and place for sure. But actually, to me, being a good role model, if you listen to Jo there for a minute, is you won't catch Jo with her shoelaces dragging in them up. Her hygiene is always good. She's always got a hydration on. She's eating properly. She's got the right kit on at the right time. If you've got to take a jacket off, she takes the jacket off, etc. That is being a good role model. And in a business context, it's being professional in everything that you do. And to me, that is different to forcibly being the first in the office, forcibly being the last to leave, forcibly doing more work than anybody else. And to me, being a good example and a good role model is actually a separate thing to pace setting. And I think sometimes people get the two things kind of confused, thinking that they're setting a good example by being in the office at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Because on the mountain, or when we finished an expedition, I would like my clients to say, and this is, say I'm Mandy, I did it, not, oh, Jo got me there. And it's interesting when you meet people at an airport, and it's happened on several occasions over the years that I've been leading groups on expeditions, and then they come up and they say, oh, I haven't had time to train enough, so you'll get me there. I'm like,
not quite
really.
Sure what they think you're going to do, Jo.
Swap legs or swap, I said, I'm basically an adventure facilitator, or a facilitator of dreams, I guess. And I said, I will give you all the tools so you can get there yourself. And you don't need to be the fittest person in the world to go and climb Kili or even Everest. What I don't know when I meet you at the airport is what's inside your head and how strong you are. And we can give you those tools to help you through, so that when you get to summit night, everything is dialed down. All you have to do is put one foot in front of the other. That's it.
Jo, we see it all the time with the business training we do. It's really, really interesting. Occasionally you get kind of negative feedback from leadership training because people think they can give you the answer. It's almost like sometimes people come and they go, well, you didn't give me the 5 Ps or the 7 S's or the 9 steps. And I can blindly follow the 9 steps and that's it. I'll be an amazing leader, job done. And we always talk to people about a toolkit. With what we're going to do is we're going to show you a whole load of tools that between us all we've used on mountains and we've used them in war zones and where else. Here's some tools, but you've got to go to a toolbox and take the right tool out. And that bit I can't tell you what to do.
Yeah, and I think we agree with this, all three of us actually, that a lot of leadership is just having a go and then being maybe a bit self-reflective afterwards and building that experience up rather than reading it in a book or going on a training course with me and Tim, as much as that would be really good. But a lot of it is actually, okay, I'm going to have a go at being a leader, and then in the evening go, when I did this, that worked really well, and when I did that, everyone hated me. So maybe I'll do more of that and less of that, and just building up that experience of it, because like Tim says, it's really hard to just have a ABC, now I'm a perfect leader, tick, right, what's the next thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're dealing with people who are predominantly in a heightened state of anxiety as they are on expedition and have been over the last year through lockdown and everything that is encompassed, people's characters change a bit. And I think the sort of sometimes the hidden part of a character will come out. So maybe their real insecurities about whether they can do things come out, or you know, or it comes out in other ways. And I've made some complete howlers on expedition. I've said the wrong thing to somebody who I thought could take a little bit of banter, and it hasn't quite worked out. Or
Jo, our public speaking course, right? Because we always say to people, if you're writing a speech, usually for weddings and things, and if you're about to say, you know, do you think Granny, right, then no is the answer. At the moment you're saying, do you think they would? If you're asking that question, right, then no, Granny's not going to like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's again, it comes back to the fact that I am human, and I am going to make mistakes. Not everybody is going to like me, but what I need to do is get everybody through this safely, because that's predominantly, I am there to instill, to give the right education to my clients, so that they can keep themselves safe, because the responsibility has to be with them as much as it is with me imparting the information. And like you say, intelligence, not information. You know, they need to use what I give them intelligently to keep themselves safe. You know, if I say to somebody about, you know, walking at altitude, you have to walk slowly so that your body can acclimatize. And I've had clients who have been bouncing off rocks and have been running around, and
For the first day.
And yeah, first day, first 2 days, and oh, so many times. And because they're like, oh, it's just walking, you know. Or I've done Everest Base Camp. I had a group who'd done Everest Base Camp, and I'm like, Kili is totally different. And it's not just because it's a little bit higher, but it's just a 100% different experience and expedition. And this chap was bouncing around. He was like, I was fine on base camp. You know, what could possibly go wrong? And then 2 days later, he was as sick as a dog. So I then dealt with the aftermath of that, and you know, got him better. And he summited, and he was like, I'm never going to do that again. That was just, I just showed myself up to be an absolute idiot. I obviously couldn't agree with him, but you know, I said, but at least at least you have the foresight to, or the intelligence to understand that when somebody who is used to the environment you're in and you're not tells you don't bounce about like Bambi because you will fall over, is listen. You know, the best advice I can give is to take my advice.
To loop back to what you were saying about comfort zones as well, for me, that's where some of the stuff that we all get up to outside of the office environment directly translates back again, because human beings, fundamentally, we like our comfort zones, right? That's a thing. And we all sit in this little bit of a bubble. And, you know, probably for the last 5 or 10 years, I wonder how many leaders have been outside, really outside of their comfort zones. And I think it's fascinating when you see somebody like Mandy, who's super together, or some of the other people you've experienced and we've sort of worked with, and then suddenly they're in an environment where they're terrified, nervous. Paul and I have been off-piste skiing with a couple of very senior lawyers who suddenly went from being kind of, you know, absolutely in charge of an environment to absolutely not in charge of their environment. And when you see them that far out of their comfort zone, suddenly got no frame of reference and nowhere to go. And one of the things that I find really, really interesting is the more in control of their environment people are normally, the farther they fall when they're not in control of their environment, because ironically, not being in control of the environment is a completely new experience for them, as well as the environment they actually find themselves in, if that made any sense. So if you look at, you know, the pandemic over the last 12 months and look at leaders, suddenly you've got a whole load of people that are used to being absolutely top of the tree, you know, CEO, CFO, COO, whatever they might be, got the whole thing nailed down, and suddenly all of the wheels are coming off. And to me as well, that's where the whole mental health thing kicked in, because suddenly these people are sitting there and they're going, I've got this massive responsibility. I'm outside my comfort zone. I don't know what to do. And then they punish themselves for being outside their comfort zone and not knowing what to do. And the whole thing kind of suddenly spirals down again. And for me, to get involved in some of the kind of outdoor type stuff is really, really good, because if you can practice being out of your comfort zone and understand how to cope with the I say panic, but you know what I mean, that kind of anxiety that goes with being out of control, then actually to me that has to make you a better team leader at whatever level when you go forward.
Yeah, 100%. And I found, you know, in the last, since the 23rd of March last year, it's a date that I will never ever forget. You know, all of my outdoor work was cancelled, 100%. So basically I had nothing in the diary. So my business was basically shut down, and I worked for different companies, leading and guiding and teaching. And I was like, oh gosh, now what? Okay, so I need to do something about this. And the week before lockdown, when I knew that I wasn't going to be in the outdoors, I applied to be a Tesco delivery driver. And I thought, well, it will get me through the first couple of months until we find out what's going on. And in the end, I actually did it for 11 months over and above sort of the speaking and getting back into the outdoors in August and September. And for me, it actually was a really good way of sort of ruffling my feathers a bit again, I guess. You know, I'm very comfortable in the environment I work in. And I think it's really good to, although I never wanted it, what happened over the last year, nobody ever wants to happen. But I think I've come out of it stronger because I'm like, oh yeah, I can deal with stuff like that. And even down to such a more micro level is I turned 50 in March, and usually I would have gone and climbed something really big and spectacular, or, what have you. And I decided to do a 24-hour marathon challenge where I ran a mile every hour on the app for 24 hours, or it's just over a mile. And I'd never run a marathon before. I hadn't done any training for it. I'm fit, but not marathon fit. And in the end, I ended up running nearly 30 miles over 24 hours. And then I went and did a bike ride last week, again, to get myself in that feeling of, am I going to complete this? This is going to hurt, but I need that. I need that planning for an expedition style. I need to, again, just get out my comfort zone. I ended up cycling 195 miles over 24 hours. I've never done that before. I was so proud of myself, and that fits along climbing Everest.
Yeah.
Though it doesn't have to be the big stuff.
Well, we had this conversation the day, Jo, didn't we? And so everyone says to me, what's the toughest one you've ever done? I go, the Tarp de Tour. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, definitely. Paul, I've got to tell you, just before we wrap this up, right, there was a very dangerous text conversation happened between Jo and I the other day, where Jo was essentially suggesting, Sandstone Everest expedition. I mean, obviously, I didn't get to the top. Jo's all up and going again. So I reckon you and Mandy, Paul, have got Everest written all over it. We'll have a team Sandstone Everest expedition. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. Everest, because we were talking about how Gucci everything's got on Everest, and the fact, because I climbed on the south side and went back in 2016 and fortunately reached the summit, and would like to go to the north side. And Tim, you were on the north side when the earthquake struck, so that's unfinished business for you. And we were talking about Everest stripped back, so putting it,
there we go,
putting it out there. Not a cappuccino maker in sight, just good old back to basics. Mind you, I say back to basics. In the early days, they had wine and pate and all this sort of stuff. So,
and some pretty smart tweed outfits too. I'm kind of up for it.
Yeah. But I think it's got a good ring to it.
We're on it. Watch this, guys. Watch this space. Thank you very much for listening. Who knows what might happen in the next one? Jo, thank you very much. That was brilliant.